ladies and gentlemen. If I can have your attention, please. There's only a small number of people here, but I would say that great ventures start small, and we shall follow up the meeting this evening with a letter to all those that we've written to. And it is a very special evening, as you're going to discover, when Antoine Aissa, who is the chairman of the board of Brumana High School, and I speak to you about establishing an endowment and what that means. I'd like to warmly welcome visitors on the screen. You can see maybe one or two of them. I know there's someone from Luxembourg. There are people from the United Kingdom, there are people from the USA, and I'm sure others may speak up and say they're from elsewhere as well, and from Lebanon, who've joined us on the screen tonight, and I'm very grateful to them for being here. So without more ado, I'm going to hand over to Antoine, who's going to introduce the evening.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, governors, parents, teachers, and esteemed friends of BHS, and all the people that are listening to us online. First, I would like to thank you for joining us today as we launch the BHS I Serve Endowment Fund on the occasion of Brumana High School 150 years anniversary. Your presence here is a testimony to the deep bond that connects you to this remarkable institution. In this challenging time, our school, like Lebanon itself, has faced financial difficulties for the past 4 years due to the country's economical default. But our commitment to education, service, and to the Quaker value of peace, integrity, community, and equality have never stopped. Today, we stand together to put this value into action. We have decided to launch the BHS I Serve Endowment Fund to overcome future uncertainty and ensure a stable, regular income for the school, guaranteeing its perpetuity. This fund is not just a financial effort, it's a translation of our values. Peace by ensuring the tranquility of the educational mission, integrity through responsible stewardship of our resources, community by coming together as one to support our school, and equality by providing opportunity to all. The Quaker tradition teaches us the importance of service, of lifting up those in need, and of contributing to the betterment of our community and beyond. We recognize our duty to help others, and this fund is a tangible way to put this value into practice. It's worth noting that BHS I Serve Endowment Fund will serve as a financial safety net for our students and our school, protecting it from unforeseen challenges in the future that may arise. This fund will be closely monitored by the Board of Governors and by the Board of Trustees of Kuwait, and it will be managed by an external, carefully selected fund manager, and the fund will be, of course, invested abroad. I will hand over the floor to our principal, David, who will provide more detail about the fund and, more importantly, how it works. But before I do, I want to emphasize that we understand that not everyone can contribute. However, for those who can, we invite you to be part of this legacy. Your support will make a lasting impact on the education and opportunity we provide to future generation of students. In closing, I want to express my deepest appreciation for you present tonight and for the people who are listening as well. Together we can ensure that Brumana High School continue to be a beacon of knowledge, service, and hope for the next 150 years and beyond. Thank you very much. David.
Thank you very much, Antoine. As I said, it's small numbers of people who have a great vision, and it's persistence in driving that vision that leads to ultimate success. And to set up an endowment takes time, energy, vision, and patience. So the question you might ask, well, what is an endowment? An endowment is a gift. It is something that is given to a worthwhile institution that has lasting and perpetual value. Now, if, for example, you give some money to the school to buy some chairs, or you give some money to the school to support the staff, that money is spent and disappears. But with an endowment, the money does not disappear. It is held and invested forevermore. I'll give you a little example of this. In the 1980s, I worked in a school called Dulwich College in London, which is a famous English school and a very successful one. In 1619, Edward Alleyn, who was a Shakespearean actor, acting Shakespeare's plays in the time of Shakespeare's life, was acting in the play Macbeth, which, as you know, is a tragedy. Now, in Macbeth, there are three witches who are very evil. And Edward Alleyn, when he was acting, saw a fourth witch on stage. And he believed this was a messenger from the devil, and that he must improve the way he lived. So what he did was he endowed a school for the poor and for the uneducated in South London. To do that, he had some land in South London, and he gave his money. And with his money, the school was built, and the endowment was the land that he left. The land is still there today. But on the land have been built hundreds of thousands of houses as London expanded. And the result of that is that the school collects all the rents from all the buildings and has that to spend each year. But the original endowment, the land, is still there and still belongs to the school. So if you give money for an endowment, such as the I Serve endowment for Brumana High School, your money goes in the bank and it's invested as a sum of capital. And the interest that that money generates is used to pay for financial aid for the school, for example, or for other projects. But the money you give is there forevermore, in perpetuity. It never goes. So if you give $100, it will be $100 in 100 years' time. It's still there. It's just invested so that it produces more money in order to fund whatever the school wants to do. Now, the important thing about an endowment for a school or a university is that schools and universities depend for their income almost exclusively on tuition fees. If the tuition fees aren't paid, the school can't survive. It's as simple as that. And as you know, in recent years in Lebanon, we have all been brought to the brink of bankruptcy, of disaster in different ways. And that here has made us realise the importance of preserving this precious gem of a school and making sure that now that it's 150 years old, it will be here in another 150 years' time. And the provision of an endowment will help that, because it will provide, in addition to your paying tuition fees, an alternative income stream coming into the school, the capital of which will generate money that can be used for financial aid, which at the moment, for example, is paid by the school. So one of the things an endowment does is to reduce the school's costs, but also, in our case with the iServe Endowment, to preserve the education of children at Rumana High School who have not yet been born. At Dulwich College that I mentioned earlier, there are literally hundreds of children every year being educated at the school, not by school tuition fees, but by the endowment. So a school that has an endowment is a wealthy school. It is not reliant simply on annual collection of fees and so on. What we've done at Rumana is to open a new bank account with Barclays International in the UK, which has been opened by Quiet, who own the school, the Quaker International Educational Trust. And all the funds that we gather for the endowment will be placed in that bank account and then invested in the UK by fund managers that we have selected. And the fund managers are Rathbones, who are known for their historic success in generating funds through investment in stock markets around the world, and who are also ethically sound, so that the money will not be invested in things like weapons, for example. It will follow, the investment will follow a strict ethical code. So when you give to an endowment, what you need to understand is it's a long-term investment. It's a way that people can invest knowing that what they give will have an impact on the school and on the children at the school hundreds of years after you have all passed away. It's not an instant thing where you give and it's spent. It's a long-term thing. And the first thing the school has to do is to build up a sum of capital. So, for example, at a previous school I worked at, in 6 years we built up a capital fund of £10 million, which is about $12 million. If you work that out at 5%, you come to the figure 600,000. That $600,000 a year is the interest generated by that capital fund, which can be used instantly for financial aid or whatever the school determines. But the $12 million remains. It's still there. And it continues to be invested each year. So it's just the interest that you get that is actually spent. We have forms here which you can take away if you wish, should you wish to make a donation, and these forms will explain how you can donate, whether in Lebanon or abroad, in the USA or in the UK. For those who choose to donate large amounts, we are going to establish an honours board so that people who have had the wisdom and foresight to invest are recognised by the school in the long term as people who have donated to the iServe Endowment and helped to preserve the education of children tomorrow and in the distant future when we're no longer here. If you think about it, it's a bold move to establish an endowment. When you have no endowment, why start? Take a long time to generate. And I thought about that when I lived in Scotland and it was decided to start an endowment. But what was amazing was how quickly the capital sum grew and it began to generate income for the school. On the 16th of November, as part of our 150th anniversary celebrations, alongside this long-term plan, we are holding a gala dinner, about which you'll hear more soon, at the Al Habtour Hotel in Sinelfield, and all the proceeds from that event will go to the iServe Endowment Fund. So there are all kinds of ways in which we shall build up the total capital. In 1888, Tottenham Hotspur Football Club, of which I'm sure you've heard, was established by 5 men in a pub in East London. Today, it's one of the most famous football clubs in the world. Tonight, a few people who are serious about Romana High School have come along to an event in which we are launching the iServe Endowment Fund. One day, although you may not be remembered, Romana High School will, thanks to the success of this fund that we launch now. Thank you. You're muted, Carolyn. You need to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, you mentioned that the investment firm is ethically sound and does not invest in weapons, and I'm wondering about their investments in fossil fuel infrastructures. Can you speak to that?
No, they don't invest in fossil fuel infrastructures either. We interviewed several firms before we chose them, and one of the prerequisites for passing our test was that it would pass the Quaker test for ethical investment. And as I know you're a Quaker, Carolyn, I think you can be comfortable that we haven't broken any of the rules.
Thank you.
Alcohol as well.
Yes, no alcohol, and the other things that you would expect us not to invest in. Are there any other questions that anyone here, or indeed on the screen? Isn't it amazing? You know, someone's asking a question from the United States of America, and here we are in Lebanon. I always think it's incredible, really, but I'm old-fashioned and very old. So I grew up in the era of black and white television, so... Yes, you have a question. Anyone else want to ask any questions? Yes?
Yeah, I'd be curious. I'm curious you mentioned what they don't invest in. I'm curious to know what they do invest in.
Well, I honestly can't answer that question. We did go through all this at the time. There are supermarkets, for example, I remember was one thing that is invested in, but everything that you will find on the stock market that is not objectionable in the 21st century, basically.
Buildings, all kind of development, all these. Building equity.
Are there other questions? Yes.
Who makes the decision how to invest?
The decision is made by Rathbones, and they are the fund managers. And we have a committee, a management committee, that requires them to report to the committee on a number of occasions a year as to the yield that they have successfully generated, and to report more generally on those investments.
Are they like aggressive, medium?
Medium.
Medium aggressive.
Yeah. Well, yeah, medium. I mean, they're not going to take big risks, especially when the sums of money are smaller that are collected. We discussed that at some length with them.
Okay.
Thank you. We have already had 2 donors, by the way, before the launch started. So the fund is not empty. But obviously we want to build it up as rapidly as we can over the next year or 2 so that it starts generating income, which we can then use for financial aid for students. And that will then reduce the amount of financial aid we have to provide as a school for the students whose parents can't afford the fees here. So in that way it reduces the costs, because it's an alternative income stream. That is, the interest generated is the alternative income stream.
Is there any financial model, and what will be the target year 1, year 2, year 3?
No, I think we're looking at raising our target initially to raise $10 million, and we're looking at a kind of single-figure percentage yield year on year. Good evening, Georgette. Welcome. I've just spotted you. I think Philip McDonough has a question.
Hi, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, very clearly.
Just to say, it's really a comment on a question, just to congratulate you on this initiative, the iServe Endowment Fund. I think it's a tremendous way of moving forward and giving you some, as you described very well in your presentation, it gives you the independence and a source of ongoing income for hopefully for generations to come.
Thank you very much for your comment, Philip. I appreciate that a lot. Philip speaking to us from Northern Ireland. We've got a true global range tonight, I think. Yes, and it does mean independence. When I worked in the UK, which I did as a school principal for 25 years, people were always envious of schools with endowments, and because it was felt they were safe. They had an extra string to their bow, an extra income stream that would ensure that they would survive and could prosper for the future. And those were especially schools, of course, that had established the endowment some time earlier, because at the beginning it's hard. And that's why I say it's a long-term investment. It takes a bit of vision, a bit of courage, and a lot of patience to make it work. But once it happens, then it will go on forever. And you're probably aware that places like Harvard University generate from their endowment over $100 million a year. So you can imagine how big the endowment is. Now, we're not as famous as Harvard yet, but the principle is the same. Well, if there are no more questions, I'm going to call the meeting to a close. Thank you for attending online and in person. And here, at least, in the meeting house at Brumana High School, we're going to go on eating and drinking. Not non-alcoholic drinks, Carolyn, only. Thank you very much for attending indeed. I appreciate that, and I appreciate all that all of you on the screen are doing for Brumana High School, because I know quite a lot of you have already donated or are giving, and I'd just like to put a little word for Kristen Barke at St George's School in Luxembourg, whom I first met online, and in fact I've never met him in the flesh. Who help Brumana High School every year with books and online subscriptions and so on, because of his sympathy and the school's sympathy with us here in the Middle East. And we've appreciated that enormously, alongside the donations of Quiet and of individuals who are on screen today, who've made a great deal of difference to the school. So I'm delighted to see you all, and hope that that you can help us build this endowment up in the years to come. Thank you very much indeed.
Just two questions. What's the minimum and maximum amount?
To give? Well, obviously there's no maximum. So, I mean, if you fancy giving $1 million, you know, that would be great. And actually, there's no minimum either. But actually, your question's a good one, because to build up the fund, generally speaking, those people who give to an endowment are going to give considerable sums of money, because they know that they may not see in their lifetimes a huge return on that. But it's something, it's a legacy to leave. To say, right, I'm going to give $10,000 because I know that money will be there forever and it will generate income for future generations of students and for the school. I hope that answers the question.
Well, I have a small minimum. It should be more than the expense to transfer the money from here to England. So less than $100 will be lost by the bank. So.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And by the way, these sheets on this table, if you want to take one away, they are indicate how you can give specifically, through banks in Lebanon or in the UK or in the USA. Thank you very much.